the time and the time is now. The British Trust for Ornithology reported only a few weeks ago that in the past 10 years, we have lost 40% of our swallows, house martins, and swifts. So 10 years, 40% drop in the population. Things are going very, very wrong out there. And we need to do everything we can to ensure that we simply are not wiping out our wildlife. Dear, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, my screen won't change. Let's see. That's it. Okay, a little bit of a hiccup there. I think that swifts are the most spectacular birds that you can have above your house, above your church, in your house, in your church. They are our fastest bird in level flight. They are amazing aerobatic creatures. They have incredible abilities in the air. And here's some photographs that show just how amazing creatures they are. We couldn't see these sort of things until we got these really advanced digital cameras, which froze the motion. But on the top two slides, we see swifts drinking. Now, swifts never land except to breed. They are creatures that fly all the time. If you find them on the ground, they're in trouble. They just live in the air. And if you think that's a bit odd, well, think of sharks. Sharks swim continuously in the sea. They have to in order to breathe because they haven't got swim bladders, so they can't just float in the water. They have to keep moving all the time. And if you think of the air as a liquid, which it is in a way, swifts are just swimming in that liquid all the time. Now, here they are drinking. To drink, they have to skim the water. I was watching this on the River Po a couple of weeks ago in Italy, and I was having a glass of beer on the banks, and the swifts were coming down to drink at about 4 in the afternoon. And this is what they were doing. They fly down and they just touch the water, and they do it so fast. It's like this. You can hardly see it. And they are scooping up just a few little bits of water, drops into their beaks, and then flying off. Look at the accuracy needed. Imagine trying to do that if you were in a glider or something. Just skim the surface. If a swift makes a mistake, it'll probably die. It'll get stuck in the water and get eaten by a fish. But that happens only extraordinarily rarely. Just amazing. And then below right, you see here a swift catching an insect. There's the insect, it's probably a hoverfly, and the swift is catching it. Now, you know how difficult it is to swat a fly in your kitchen. How long does it take you to swat a fly? You're dancing around all over the place trying to whack it. Well, by some counts, swifts can catch up to 20,000 insects a day, and they're flying, and the bigger intelligent ones are trying to avoid the swifts. So you can begin to see just how agile a swift is. Bottom left, we have swifts mating in the air. I think swifts are the only warm-blooded creature that mates in flight, and it is amazing. You can see them typically in May and June, early June, when they arrive. You'll see two swifts up in the sky, and they start making a different call, and they circle around each other, and then suddenly they go brrr, like that, and at the bottom they touch and mate. And imagine trying to do that at 60 miles an hour in a power drive. It's just amazing. In the middle, we have a swift leaving a nest box, and they leave at high speed and they come in at high speed, probably to avoid birds of prey catching them. But look at the swift's foot. It's got only 4 fingers, and they all point forwards, which means it can't grip like that. It hasn't got a thumb, so it can't grip like that. It can only cling. It can cling onto vertical surfaces like walls and tree trunks, but it cannot grip. And that is the reason why it drinks in flight, catches food in flight. Now, this is a stunningly successful design. Here we have a photograph of a fossil swift from what is now the Rhineland in Germany. It was found only about 30 years ago, 25, 30 years ago, I think. And it fell into what is now the Rhineland and what was then the right-hand banks of a hot tropical sea that extended as far as Glasgow. And if you go to Glasgow, you go into the Natural History Museum there, you'll find loads of fossils from that hot tropical sea. Amongst them, things like this Basilosaurus. This is a Basilosaurus, a pair of Basilosauridae. They are an early whale. You can see the blowholes, an early mammal. And there are also amazing sharks in that museum, sharks with like teeth sticking out the top of their heads like that. They look like sort of Mohican haircut, and but they're teeth. Nobody knows what they were for. But one thing about the Basilosaurus and the Mohican sharks is that they're extinct, and everything else in that gallery is extinct. But the Swift lives on. The Swift is such a good design, it lasted until now, 49 million years. We've been around by some accounts only 150,000 years in our present form, a mere blip in time. So something to think about. And this is what Swifts do for us. They animate our skies. Now, these back streets of Barcelona shown here with these time-lapse photos of Swifts scorching around are pretty grim places, actually. In winter, your view is probably of a cement wall, and all you can hear is traffic and the dustbin men and drunken tourists dropping bottles and arguing. It's not such a glamorous place, really, as it is made out to be. And you have not much in the way of visual stimuli. It's just narrow streets, exhaust fumes, cars, banging noises, nothing really to stimulate you or make you feel you're in the real world. But suddenly in April, you'll be lying in bed and you'll feel something has changed, and you'll bang open those shutters and whoosh, the Swifts are pouring past. They've got back from Africa and they are bringing life again. And they show you that there is another world outside the world of closed rooms, darkened windows, endless staring at screens and worrying about everything. There's a world out there that can lift you out of despondency and out of terror and out of misery into something different, a different space, the real world, the live world, the natural world that is out there all the time, even though we're doing our best to get rid of it. And it's the world that can lift us above other things. Now, Swifts are long distance migrants, and they eat only flying insects. They're always in flight, except when they're nesting. They travel huge distances every year on migration. They spend the winter in Africa. They spend summer in Europe and Asia. They are faithful to their mates and their nests. The breeding range goes from Ireland right over to Beijing. And they all of them go down to Africa for the winter. So the Beijing ones have this gigantic run. They're faithful to their mates and their nests. So the pair will split up for winter, but they'll rejoin at the nest. And they're totally faithful to their nest. They'll bash themselves against them if they're blocked up, for example. If you block up a hole in the eaves where the Swifts are, they will bash themselves against it until knock themselves unconscious sometimes, but they do it for several days if they find their nest blocked when they come back. We think fidelity pays off for Swifts because they have a very short breeding season. They're only here from May to July normally, 12 weeks. And their chicks can't hop around the garden all fluffy and incapable of flight when they leave the nest. They've got to leave the nest and fly straight to Africa. So they've got to be fully feathered with adult plumage in order just to leap out the nest and fly to Africa. Otherwise, it's not going to make it. And that means a very long time in the nest, average of 42 days. That's a long time for a small bird to be in the nest. And so the sooner the adults can start breeding, if they can find their old mate and find their old nest, they've got like a 2-week, 3-week start on other birds. They have to find a new mate and find a new nest or make a new nest. So that's good for them. Unlike lots of small birds, they're slow breeders. They only have on average 1.5 chicks a year. The converse of that is they live a long life. They can live at 7-8 years is quite normal, and they can even live up to 20-21 years. That's the longest known Swift we know of. But teenage Swifts are pretty common. So fast, not many things can catch them. Things that catch them are like high-speed falcons, peregrines, kestrels, hobbies, and also at the nest, birds like crows and gulls sometimes. But predation is not a big feature. Most swifts die of hypothermia and starvation when they hit problems on migration and the weather's dreadful, like it is now in Britain. The weather's dreadful, it's very cold. It was 9 degrees when I woke up this morning. That means no insects in the air. So that means swifts have to look very hard for insect food, and they may just die of starvation. Famous for their screaming parties, swifts are social birds. We have very, very few social birds that exist as societies. We have birds that flock in winter for protection, but we have very few birds that breed together. Swifts are one of them, and it means that when we play swift calls, they don't react negatively to them as territorial birds like blue tits, blackbirds, other small birds do. They react positively to them. They come and see what's going on. Here's the migration run of a swift, showing how it goes down to the Congo for the winter and goes over to East Africa for a Christmas break and then flies back. The remarkable things here are the 2 long flights over the sea and the desert. These are 3-4 day flights with no water and no food on this run across the sea, and across the Sahara Desert, very little water and very little food. And then the other really remarkable thing is here we have a swift that goes to Morocco and then does this Morocco to Cambridge flight, all that way from Morocco to Cambridge on its way back to breed in 2 days. Does that flight in 2 days. Amazing. Swifts used to nest in trees, and we used to think they nested in rocky cliffs and holes in cliffs and that sort of thing. They do sometimes, but it's quite scarce to find them there. I've traveled hundreds of miles of rocky sea coast looking for swifts and found very few indeed. But they do nest in numbers in ancient primeval forest. And the best example is the Białowieża forest in Poland over here on the left, where at a recent count, 600 swifts were found nesting in old woodpecker holes in ancient hornbeam trees. And then here we have an example in Britain. This is the Abernethy forest, the old Caledonian pine forest at the Abernethy Royal Society of Protection of Birds Reserve, where swifts quite recently started nesting in old woodpecker holes. And then see what it looks like. Here is a baby swift sitting in a hole in an oak tree in southern Sweden. They're secret nesters. They're nesting, basically, we have chopped down all the forests all over the world. Where we have replanted them, we've planted them with what are basically tree farms where trees are cropped and woodpeckers aren't welcome, and trees don't get much above 30 years old before they're sawn down and sold and replanted. So the swifts basically followed the wood as we chopped down the forests from probably Roman Etruscan times onwards, with increasing speed and utility. The swifts followed the wood and moved into our buildings. And here are examples of swift nests. Top left, under Pantars outside Lincoln, the swifts are nesting on the roofing felt underneath. Second, a wall in Belgium. We never found out what had happened to that brick, but swifts had got in and were nesting inside it. On the right, a post-war house in Britain, swifts have crept up the tiles at the end, and although they're excluded from the loft by these grills here, they've found a gap between roof and tiles behind the gutter. Down here, this is a farm in Sweden. It's a barn, and the swifts are nesting on the wooden beam behind the fascia board. Here, a house in Britain with some truly botched, awful work done to it, but it's enabled the swifts to get up behind there and get into this plastic soffit box, and they're breeding inside there. Now, these are very, very safe nests from predation, but they're very vulnerable to maintenance work or demolition, which often destroys them. Swift nests look like this. You're not going to see a swift nest unless you're actually working, say, on the re-roofing of a church, which is the background photograph here. This is a church being re-roofed. And they found, when they took the tiles off, they found all these nests and all this grass. Now, most of the grass would have been brought in by house sparrows, but here you can see a swift nest just sitting there, sort of twisted out of the grass. You might not see it unless you actually knew what it was. And here's another one. This is another roof that's been ripped off for repair, and hey, there's a swift nest there, and you wouldn't notice it normally amidst all this debris. The nests are made from airborne material. They pick up the stuff in the air and they stick them together with saliva. And here's a good one. This is made of moss, feathers, anything floating in the air. And there's a day-old chick and an egg sitting in there. And it's stuck together with saliva, giving that sort of slightly shiny appearance. Here's another one in a roller blind box in Tel Aviv, in a 1920s, 30s building in the White City in Tel Aviv. It's a World Heritage, UNESCO World Heritage site of all these Art Deco mansions. And the swifts have wriggled up beside the roller blinds and have got enough space to build a nest here. And here's another one. This is a pub down in West Sussex. They took off the barge boards and found that the swifts had been wriggling up behind the barge boards and making a nest. And that's a really classic nest there. But swifts are in trouble. Main problems: loft insulation, intolerance. People are increasingly intolerant to sharing their buildings with any creatures whatsoever, apart from dogs and cats maybe. And re-roofing and demolition, which are destroying nests, eggs and chicks. Modern architecture. Buildings have changed totally in their materials and in their structures since the 19th century. It starts with the rebuilding of the Houses of Parliament after that huge fire. And the Houses of Parliament have become the first air-conditioned building in Britain with pumped air, meaning no ventilation holes that birds can get in. And then it goes on with Mr. Selfridge's store on Oxford Street, which is the first steel-framed concrete building in Britain, and initiates a whole change in how buildings are put together. And that, plus stainless steel, plastics, sheet, glass, all sorts of new materials for buildings, and a tendency towards air conditioning and pumped air systems rather than simply opening the window or having a ventilated loft and a ventilated basement with outside air coming in, means that buildings are impenetrable to many of the creatures that lived in them before, like sparrows, starlings, black redstarts, swallows, house martins, and swifts. So trouble. And also the law is failing swifts. We have wonderful legislation protecting bats, but swifts' nests are not protected unless they're in use, so they can be destroyed outside the breeding season. And as swifts are totally dependent on those nests being available, they're sunk if they come back and find there's no nest for them, unfortunately. The main problem is exclusion. We know that before the First World War, about 10% of the housing stock had suitable ventilation that swifts could wriggle in and breed inside the loft or the gables. It drops. It drops to after the Second World War, when the housing regulations changed, building regulations changed to say lofts must be grilled, birds can't get in, and bats too. This really marks the sort of the great end of bats in your loft for the UK. And bats have declined by apparent 99% since the First World War. So you can start seeing what we're doing to wildlife out there. My guess is that nothing in post-2000 houses can provide nesting space. And here's a photograph of Lewisham, which I took from the railway, Lewisham's bus station. And you can see what a sort of grim urban environment we're creating. There's just one big tree and a few shrubs. Everything else is a sort of ugly modern building with, maybe you could get peregrines nesting on this roof, but otherwise these buildings are useless for wildlife. They're useless for supporting any sort of wildlife at all. Insecticides and insect declines are starting to make a really hefty effect on our country and right across Europe and the world as well. And I'm indebted to this slide for Professor David Goulson at the University of Sussex, who interviewed local farmers and asked them what they were spraying on their crops. And this farmer sprayed these chemicals onto one crop of oilseed rape. There are 22 spraying applications on one crop of fungicide, herbicide, fungicide, molluscicide, herbicide, fungicide, fertilizer, insecticide, fungicide, molluscicide, herbicide. It just goes on and on. And the result is there will be nothing. All these chemicals do exactly what they say on the tin. They kill. And there'll be nothing in that field except creatures that eat the crop directly, and then creatures that eat the creatures that eat the crop. So there will be wood pigeons. There'll be no fungi, there'll be no insects, there'll be no snails or anything like that. There'll be wood pigeons who go in and eat the crop, and then there'll be things like buzzards and crows that go in and eat any dying snails, insects that they find in the crop, and eat any dead wood pigeons too. So you get a massively reduced biodiversity, completely altered by what is being put onto the land. And recent insect declines in the UK are estimated 60% over 25 years, and in Germany at 80%. So we are in real trouble. Yeah. Heading for extinction, are we? Well, we've got these figures. I said it was 40% in the past 10 years. You can see from 1995, 62% for England, Scotland's 58%, Wales 74%. 1.37 million UK swifts have been lost since 95. We've done this before. We've done this, birds like the great auk who lived on little islands and nobody ever saw except sailors. Now we're doing it to things that live right on top of us. So, food for thought. Why help wildlife? Now, an awful lot of people, I think, of us, people like me, as soppy sentimentalists who have cuddly toys on the bed and just go goo goo over aren't wild creatures lovely? Isn't that a pretty bee and so on? Well, it's not that at all. To quote Professor Paul Ehrlich at Stanford University, our civilization depends utterly on plants, animals, microorganisms of Earth that supply it with essential ecosystem services, from crop pollination and protection to supplying food from the sea and maintaining a livable climate. I mean, you can guess why you only get farmed fish at places like Waitrose now. It's because there's no other fish to be had. Farmed fish is the only cost-effective way of producing all those sea bass fillets, bream, load of other fish. It's farmed now. Salmon, trout, it's farmed because they aren't the wild fish anymore. And here we have an example of sort of the muddled thinking out there. A lot of people are saying, oh, let's have bees. Let's have bees. Let's have some beehives. We'll be doing our bit for biodiversity and ecology. Well, no, you won't actually. Beehives with honeybees in. Honeybees are an alien Southeast Asian species that was brought here probably with chickens. Amongst the very first movement of animals around the earth was chickens and honeybees brought by very, very early peoples because they were easy to farm and they produced useful food. However, honeybees are not that wonderful pollinators, and we've got hundreds of wild bees in Britain, most of them solitary, that are much better pollinators. And this bee here is a leaf cutter bee, fascinating, solitary bee. Look them up. They're just great things to have around your garden, and they are vastly better pollinators than honeybees are. Look at that, its bottom covered in pollen, much better at pollinating than a honeybee. And that's the sort of thing we ought to be supporting if we want our crops to thrive. Now, why do built-up areas really matter for wildlife? Well, paradoxically, the University of Sheffield has done studies that show that urban areas in the UK now hold more species than the countryside. So our urban areas have become nature reserves, the last safe places for many species. Why is this? Because urban areas have got much more variety, all sorts of places, canal banks, playing fields, allotments, neglected gardens, green roofs, areas covered in creeper, much more variety. Even caravan parks hold more biodiversity than the countryside because they are not sprayed. They are not treated with chemicals continuously. So more species in town, in your village, in your local urban area, in your suburb, than out there in the countryside. True, most of them are small, most of them are invertebrates, but they are the species we've got to keep. Safeguard your church's swifts. Your swifts will probably be in the eaves of the nave or chancel, or in holes in the old walls, these sort of places. If you have swifts in your church, don't block their access. Let them live in peace. They've got nowhere else to go, as all new buildings and many old ones are sealed and insulated when roofed or re-roofed. People say, oh, they'll fly away and find somewhere else, dear. And the answer is no, they won't. Clean. Swifts are the UK's cleanest birds with self-cleaning nests. Swift nests can be minimal. This is one of the most minimal ones I've found. They've hardly built a nest at all. They're made of light materials caught in flight, like feathers and thistledown. The adults eat the chicks' droppings. We haven't the faintest idea why, but they do. It may be to recycle minerals because their diet of insects and water is very, very low in minerals. And the nests and debris are eaten up by tiny insects like larder beetles during autumn, harmlessly. Swifts can help you as public relations stars because they're spectacular, they're attractive, and they're dramatic. They're an apex insectivore, top of the heap. And they're brilliant biodiversity indicator. You can say, look, we've got swifts in the church and they're thriving. And that means that the churchyard is fine, that the local area is good. It's producing insects, which mean it is biodiverse. We're holding on to biodiversity in our church, in our churchyard, in our parish, because the swifts are doing okay. They're showing the way. Adding nest places to your church. Well, this is the Church of the Sacred Heart in Reading. It's a Catholic church, part serving the local Polish community, and they invited us in during refurbishment to fit swift nest boxes in the tower because they have swifts in the street. And we thought, wow, wonderful. So we put together a scheme and we got funding. We got funding from a very nice millionaire property developer who lives around the corner, who said, yes, he would fund a few £100 or £1,000 or something to put up these nest boxes. And there's far more than just shown here. And as you can see, they're pretty much invisible from outside the building, and the swifts cannot get into the tower itself. They can only get into the boxes. And this is another one. This is my mother's local church, St. Mary the Virgin in St. Neots. And here again, the local Swift group, Action for Swifts, we got them involved because the colony, the nearby Swift colony, was in a factory with an asbestos roof that was going to be knocked down. And it is imperative to save the Swifts. So we got Action for Swifts who work out in the Cambridgeshire area to negotiate with the church wardens, the vicar and the congregation and the bell ringers. Everybody thought it was a good idea, doesn't interfere with the bells at all. And they played swift calls and they provided 60 nest places in stages and 47 are in use. A fantastic rescue project because it meant that the swifts who'd been in the factory with the asbestos roof were rehoused. Here's another one. Here's one in the Oranjekirk Swift colony in Amsterdam, where they have the swift nests up in this tower here, and then they put these nice signs outside. I think that is that one there, actually. Nice signs outside telling you all about the swifts and why it's important to save them. A really great bit of publicity. We've used this sign elsewhere for other swift projects, just getting it translated. Other architectural opportunities. It doesn't have to be sort of like behind louvers or behind gaps in walls like that. You can actually fit the nest boxes inside. This is Turnham Green Church in London, and they fitted the swift nest boxes inside, out of view, and the swifts can swoop in and out of them. So different architectural styles, you've got potential. Listed, grade 1 or grade 2 star, negotiate with the diocese. You'd never quite know what they're going to agree to. This is St. Albans Cathedral and Abbey Church, which I think is grade 1 listed. And somehow they agreed to put up these nest boxes and also this amazing pipe, which stuns me, I must say. All these wonderful Roman bricks here, stuns me, but it's been done. So I think always, when you're thinking of nest boxes, negotiate with the diocese. Use swift calls to attract them. Very simple kit. an amplifier, a timer, loudspeaker or two, and our SwiftCall CD, which we sell off the website. No problem at all. You can start off about 30 quid with these systems. They're very quick and easy to buy the stuff on Amazon, or you can spend a bit more for more reliable gear. But you can find them on various websites. Peak Boxes sell ready-made units. Do Swift walks and record Swifts. Get everybody around your church in the congregation interested. They can work for conservation. They look after dawn and before dusk, count the low-flying screaming swifts at rooftop height, note the exact locations, and then protect them. You can note them on the Swift Mapper app, the RSPB Swift recording app, which you can download from Google Play Store. It's a lovely way to spend an evening, watching swifts, watching bats, and recording them. Organised summer Swift evenings. This is a Swift party we held in West Hampstead. All the London Swift people came along, and we had a great time. We got the local Czechoslovak Cultural Centre to lay on a feast with lots of drink, and we had a splendid time. So why not copy it? It gets everybody together and it cheers everybody up. New nest places suitable for churches. I've shown you ones inside towers, but there's plenty of other alternatives. When you're working on the walls, you can put in these sort of things. That's the AFS S brick. That's the EcoServe brick. That's the EcoServe brick, again, in successful use at Brighton General Hospital. And that's a simple box you can put under eaves on ancillary buildings around the church. Where to put Swift nest boxes? Anywhere, really. Perfect, successful placing is under deep sheltering eaves. Assess every site individually. There's no standard answer because Swifts like it cozy. Not too hot, not too cold, not too windy, not too wet. So there you are. We can send you these instructions and you've got a copy of this presentation, so no excuse for getting it wrong. Here's another project, a really beautiful project for a new build building where I've had architects say, you can put them in, but they mustn't be visible. Okay. This project said, we're going to make them the main feature of the building. We're going to put in the nest bricks, nest boxes into the wall, and we're going to get an artist to carve Swifts all over them. Becomes the main feature of the building. Be upfront, be honest, be direct, and be aesthetic, and you'll get a good result. The essential support is flying insects. And here is Andy's Eco Garden in Enfield. And Andy has made this garden with no chemicals at all. It's a gorgeous garden. And it's beautiful. It's full of beautiful flowers. He even breeds mosquito larvae in that tank on the left there to feed his fish. So no artificial products at all. Really great. And everybody should be encouraged to do this too. There's plenty of support out there on how to do it. If Andy can do it, other people can too. End churchyard biocide use. France has banned the use of pesticides in all towns, villages, cities and gardens. Hackney had a campaign after a mother, her toddler and her baby were sprayed by the council spraying lorry. There was a nasty response to that, including kids like this good lad here, advertising for a pesticide-free Hackney. If they can do it, we can do it. I travel a lot and I find all over now, I find these zero pesticide signs in France. Paris, Strasbourg, Nancy, Nice have been doing it for years. No pesticides, no chemicals used in their towns, city gardens and parks. If they can do it, we can do it. We can start employing a few more unemployed people to weed by hand rather than spray chemicals and fund multinational chemical companies. Down at the bottom, we have one of the banes of my life. It is an anti-rat poison box. It's filled with poison to kill rats. You find them all over the place, railway stations, anywhere. Now, what it does is it poisons everything, because anything small enough to get into the box that wants the bait will get in. So small birds, the bait is grain, poisoned grain. So small birds, mice, shrews, voles, baby hedgehogs, they all get in and they all get poisoned willy-nilly. And then they die stunningly slowly because the poison is an anticoagulant. They suffer from internal bleeding and they take days to die. And while they're dying, dogs, cats, badgers, foxes, and birds come and eat them up because they are slow prey. And then those things get poisoned and die in turn. So something that is put there to kill rats, who may or may not be a problem, ends up spreading poison throughout the environment. and killing lots of creatures that you don't want to kill. So never use those. Never use those things. I used to be in charge of the property of the Tate Gallery, and I was offered these poison boxes to put around the site, and I said no. I had 2 kestrel boxes made instead and put up on ancillary buildings, and we had breeding kestrels at Millbank, and we never had an external rat problem. Reviving a town with swifts. I've almost finished now. This is an interesting one. The town of Harleston sent people to me to see, they wanted to discuss how they could revive a town using swifts. And Harleston is a town in Norfolk that did not want to become one of those towns with no shops left, just a few charity shops, and all the other shops converted to second homes, and people blasting through in their 4-wheel drive SUVs on their way to the out-of-town shopping centre, and no life left in their town at all. I've seen town after town like that in my travels. France and England and Scotland appear to be terribly affected by this. And it's just dreadful. These dead towns. And Harleston asked me, could they use Swift? And I'd never had a request like this before. I didn't really think about it, but we had a long meeting and we discussed all sorts of things. Harleston were really on the ball. They knew what they wanted and they had good ideas how to get it. Well, they do all sorts of things. They do all sorts of things using Swifts now. They have a town flag waver, and he walks up and down the high street. There he is in his orange hat. He goes up and down the high street waving the flag when the Swifts come back. So when the Swifts come back to Harleston, there's the flag waver welcoming their return. Now those flags and all the flags along the high street welcoming the Swifts back are made by the kids at the senior school here, who use their silk screening press to make the flags. And the other flags are the flags of all the countries that Swifts fly over on migration. So educational value. Then they get the tiny tots here to make thousands of cut-out paper Swifts, and then these ladies here make them into gigantic mobiles which get put up in the church and in the town hall and the public buildings. And they have these chaps here who make nest boxes with sound systems and put them up wherever anybody wants one. And what do they get out of this? Well, they get an economic effect, because people come into town to see the fun, to see the flags, to see the Swift mobiles, and then when they're all there, they chat, and they go to the antique market, they go to the farmer's market, they go to the pub, they go to the shops, they buy things, they have a drink, they have a meal, they socialize, and they spend money. And then because they're socializing, well, look at this. How often do you ever talk to children who aren't your own or your grandchildren? How often do you ever visit an old people's home unless it is to see somebody that you, a relative of yours, in there? How often do you ever talk to school children unless they're your own? I mean, as a society, we're becoming split up. We are being chopped up into sections that do not talk to each other. They do not communicate. They are even frightened of communicating. I know lots of people, when they see children misbehaving in public, do not dare to talk to them. And maybe with good reason. Maybe there's good reason to be frightened, but you've got to get society back together again. You've got to get society back together again. Otherwise, we split into these separate camps and people start to fear and then hate each other. And then society starts to break down. So what Harleston is doing is getting everybody working together. They meet each other. They talk to each other. These chaps go round and fit boxes of people and chat to them and talk to them. So there's loads of social melding, social contact going on, much more than otherwise. Educationalists, I mean, the Swifts are working as educationalists. People learn about Africa, learn about migration, they learn all sorts of other things. They learn woodwork, they learn how to make paper mobiles, they learn how to do screen printing, all sorts of things they learn. Everybody's learning a bit. Biodiversity indicators. I explained to you how Swifts as an apex predator are a brilliant biodiversity indicator. And of course, once they start noticing Swifts, they'll notice other birds too. Unique selling points. Harleston, Swift Town. We've got Aldeburgh. Aldeburgh is now a Swift town with a Swift nest box trail, a leaflet for tourists that takes them around every nest box in town. You can do the same for your church. Your church can be unique selling point. The Swift Church, the one that's got the Swift screaming around on summer evenings when we all have a lovely evening at the church, couple of sermons, cakes, glass of wine, and pop out into the churchyard to see the swifts and then the bats moving in after the swifts have gone to bed. Great. Activity generators. I've just suggested an activity to you, but look at all this activity. When we're doing nothing and just sitting looking at the news and thinking the world has gone to hell in a handcart, we are impotent and we suffer from it. But when we start doing things, we feel we're making the world a better place. All these activities make you feel worthwhile. All these people are smiling. They're all happy because they're doing good works. And when you're doing good works, you feel better and you feel the world's a better place and you feel you've got some influence. You've got some influence. You're not just a pawn disregarded by distant politicians and never think about you or care and care less. You are somebody who can do something, and that really matters. Please support biodiversity, help Swifts in your church. Contact CFGA online right after this talk to discuss it further. General advice, come back to us. Just come to our website, contact us. We can advise. We can find local people to advise you all over the UK and in places like Gibraltar, Cyprus, Malta too. We've got local people who can help you if you've got a congregation out there. So always ask. We can probably help. Thank you very much for listening to this talk. Thank you.
Well, thank you. That was amazing, very inspiring, and so much things, sort of good news things we can do. We have got questions, Edward, if that's okay.
Fine, yeah.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure, real pleasure.
Right, okay, we've got I'll start at the top. That's everybody introducing themselves. Tim Huckvale from Sibford, Oxfordshire, has 4 next boxes for Swifts in his house, all equipped with cameras, and he blogs their progress at the sibfords.uk/Swifts. That's brilliant, Tim. I'm going to go and read that as soon as we've finished here, definitely.
Excellent. That's really good. That is lovely to know.
Steve Jones, greetings, Steve from Great Bolden, Market Harborough. We put up numerous nest boxes around the churchyard and debating how best to accommodate Swifts. In brackets, the church tower is difficult in terms of access.
Yeah. Well, you might find that you can adapt the eaves of the church. If you can get inside the side eaves along the chancel, there might be some space there. They're often wired. You often find the eaves are wired. And if you take the wire down, you may be able to lure Swifts in.
Right. Thank you. Okay. Karen has said, we've always had a good population in and around our church, but numbers are down this year. We're putting up boxes in our tower. Is there a particular weather reason that the numbers are down?
Well, it has been a period of very strong cold winds from the north, which are still affecting us. We know that Swifts were held up in Spain for some time before making it through to Britain, and then they came through in a tremendous rush. They were pent up trying to get back here. We're not sure about anything else. I haven't had any reports of mass deaths of Swifts on migration, which we do sometimes get from Spain and Greece and sometimes France and Switzerland too. So nothing like that we know of. But we are becoming more and more apprehensive of what's happening in Africa, because in Africa, as you probably know from your church work, multinationals and sovereign wealth funds are buying up huge areas of farmland previously occupied by peasant-type farmers who are essentially evicted by their governments, who then sell the land. And so these poor people go and live in shanty towns outside major cities, and then a portion of them then try and cross the Mediterranean to get to Europe. But what happens to the farmland is, from being being farmed pretty much organically with minimal, if any, pesticides under the peasants type farming, it becomes highly intense agri-business type farming with mechanized, industrialized, and highly treated with chemicals. So we are apprehensive that very bad things indeed are now starting to happen in Africa regarding pesticides, as have been happening in Europe. Now, we know that certain insect-dependent birds, like flycatchers, spotted flycatcher. Well, when I'll just give you a little anecdote. When my father died in 1999, we held his funeral, and then we all went off to a huge party at my parents' old house in Wisbech St Mary in Cambridgeshire. And we emptied his wine cellar, and we just drank up all his leftover bottles. And in a state of some inebriation afterwards, I wandered around the garden counting the flycatcher nests, and there were 3 spotted flycatcher nests. Now, so far this year, I have seen 1 spotted flycatcher in the UK. Last year, I saw 1 on the Welsh border. This one I saw the other day was again in the Forest of Dean on the Welsh borders. I have seen no other flycatchers. The year before that, before last year, 2022, I saw 1 flycatcher, and that was in a park in Denmark. The flycatcher population has totally collapsed. Now, this is partly because there's no flies in Britain, but as it's a migrant to Africa, I suspect also that things are going wrong in Africa. So that's, I think, what we have to look at next. Exactly, nothing good is happening in Africa for wildlife, and an awful lot of bad things are probably happening. So I think that may well be part of the cause. There's weather changes too. The weather is more violent, more stormy, more unpredictable, and that will cause problems to insect eaters. But there we are. We've just got to do our best to clean up our act here and support creatures here better than we've been doing.
Yes. Okay, thank you for that very comprehensive answers. So just scrolling down. Yes, Sarah, we have peregrines now nesting in the church tower, new as of this year with chicks, but no swift boxes installed around the church as yet. What would you advise in this case?
Let's keep it simple. Let's just keep it peregrines.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Try another church. Try another church for your swifts.
Brilliant.
Who wants to live next door to a serial killer? You know.
And then her other question is, are there particular Swift surveys for citizen science purposes that can help monitor populations UK? I guess it's the app you said, isn't it?
It's the app. There are others. There are others, like if you can participate in the British Trust for Ornithology surveys. They have a breeding bird survey, the BBS, which you can participate in and add your Swift records to. The British Trust for Ornithology is the sort of scientific bird support organisation, and I would recommend that somebody at each church joins it. It's not expensive, and it turns out a really excellent material. Brilliant magazine, fascinating research information in a very accessible format. So somebody at each congregation should really join the BTO. I'm sure it'll be very, very helpful.
Great, thank you very much. Karen asked, how do you power the caller that you, I guess it's just battery powered.
Yeah, it's not battery powered, it's mains powered through a 12-volt transformer, but you can operate them off a car battery. You don't need that, you need a fair amount of power, but remember, you're only playing the calls for like an hour in the morning and an hour in the evening in May and probably just the second half of July. because in May, you're trying to attract birds that have lost a nest place and are looking for a new one. And in July, you're trying to attract birds who are looking for a place to nest in next year, because new swifts, juvenile swifts, will look for a place to nest in the next year before they leave, so they can get that quick start again. So really, it's only 2 hours a day in May and second half for 6 weeks, say, and you'll probably get that out of a fully charged car battery, I'm thinking. But consult an electrician or a friend who knows something about electrics if you're operating this kit remotely. Otherwise, many church towers do have power in them somewhere. I mean, they have lights, so they've got power somewhere. So you can be in luck. Yeah.
And how essential is it to have the caller? I mean, is there like a, you're 50% more likely to, is there a kind of a...
Yes, you are. You're much more likely to find the swifts, because swifts look for nest places primarily, it seems, by listening for other swifts who are advertising that they've got a place. And so swifts come and they look to see if there's space for them too. Pretty much, as far as we can make out. It certainly works really well. And with declining numbers of swifts, it's imperative we get the best possible chance at attracting them.
Brilliant. Thank you. So Sally has said, Sally Hunter, the Diocese of Sheffield have recently published guidance on swift boxes. Okay, and then she's put a link. Thank you for that, Sally.
Brilliant. There's a big swift movement in Sheffield. There's several swift groups active in Sheffield, so there's no shortage of local advice and help. So it's amazing. I've done a couple of talks in Sheffield, and I advised at a new housing estate there, and I met the local swift people, and they're just great. They're a really vigorous, nice bunch of people. So lots of help there.
And talking of help, I mean, if somebody's here and they're like, well, I want to find out if there's swifts in our churches, in locally, that kind of thing. Where do they Google? Who do they go to find out if there is any support in their area? I presume it's Action for Swifts, is it? Are they the local?
No, you can try my website.
Great.
Action for Swifts is more a specialized advisor in church nest boxes. They can tell you all. Yeah, they can tell you all about church nest boxes. They don't necessarily know who's doing it in any given area, but if you go to my website, Swift Conservation, you'll find local groups and local help listed. So you can start there,
right.
or you can just send me an email, and I'll try and find someone.
That's brilliant. Thank you. Anna, could you put that in the chat, and also our blog post that Edward helped us with quite a few years ago with advice as well, our Swift blog post. If you are there, Anna, in the chat, that would be brilliant. That's great to know. Oh, this is lovely. Karen, they say, we ring the bells in the church tower and invite everyone to come and listen to welcome back the swifts. Oh, lovely.
Oh, that's great. That's really good. Yeah.
Sarah said, will the Climate and Nature Bill, in brackets 0 hour, increase legal protection to swifts?
No, not as far as I know. No. We've tried consistently over the years. I and lots of other people have tried to influence this government. I tried even when they were in opposition to improve protection for swifts, to incorporate swift bricks in buildings, to do all sorts of things, and they've consistently fobbed us off. I mean, you can tell the depth of their commitment. The recent legislation to ensure there should be no net loss of biodiversity from new developments required developers to actually enhance biodiversity on any site they were working on. But when the bill was passed, we noticed that this had been changed so that developers could fill a whole site in, say, your town with houses, apply no improvement in biodiversity at all, but pay a farmer, maybe even in the next county, to put a few trees in. So the sort of the cynicism and expediency and falling over on their backs and waving their legs in the air to help big business is all there is. There is nothing else. There is no goodwill. There is no fellow feeling. There's no, I mean, the 19th century had this wonderful parks movement where people built big parks, rich people and desperately ghastly capitalists built huge parks or funded huge parks to enable ordinary people to have fresh air and exercise and everything else. There's none of that now. None of that at all. I mean, Central Park in New York is a miracle. It couldn't happen now. It would be built all over. I mean, developers in Britain can fill a site, wall, all of it with buildings and concrete and maybe just a few little bushes or trees or something. That's the biodiversity component, or a bit of grass that becomes basically a public dog toilet, and get away with it. And I've got a photograph comparing 1930s buildings with a new Barratt development outside Cambridge, and they're in the same street. And the 1930s buildings have got gorgeous long gardens, and the Barratt development have no gardens at all. They just have a little strip of green along the pavement. This is building places to live where all people do is sit indoors and stare at screens. There's nowhere else to go. So people are going to be driven mad. I mean, the internet is clearly doing awful things to our society, and it's going to get worse, I guess. People will be driven quite out of their minds. We know mental health problems are increasing all the time. We know that a quarter of the population are on prescription drugs for sleeplessness, depression, and anxiety. Many others are taking illicit drugs or drinking. So it's a very weird world we're creating. And unfortunately, the government is not helping at all, quite the opposite.
Which is why we need people like you to help us know how to help ourselves, isn't it?
Well, thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Precisely why, definitely.
And the church can help. The church, which is always concerned with people's inner lives, can help massively.
Yeah. Catherine Baker said, how high up do nest boxes need to be if we were to put one on our house? We have swifts in Hawkhurst. I counted 14 on Saturday, but I'm conscious that a nest I know they use might be blocked up by the homeowner.
Well, if they block it up while the swifts are nesting in it, that's an offence under the Wildlife Act, and the RSPCA and the local police wildlife officer should be informed. How high up? 5 meters. I'd say 4.5 to 5 meters up, and then upwards. Clear air, bit of clear airspace around it. No trees too close, which could provide purchase for predators.
And put put calls in them.
Yeah, if you can, yeah. or just play calls from a CD player on a table underneath, or stuck out of a window if you can't get any closer.
Yeah, in a house that's easier. Shirley said, great talk. In Winchelsea, we have swifts living in putt holes in the walls. The churchyard committee had planted 3 meadows in the churchyard to attract insects and increase biodiversity. It has been a bit contentious in the community, but we have stuck with it and it's becoming a regular feature. Don't be discouraged by the opposition. Yay!
Yeah, you can do things with flower meadows. I came across this at a church that had bought this meadow as extra graveyard space, and they told me they had constant criticism for not cutting it. It looked dreadful and all that. And I said, right. I said, what you do is you fly mow a serpentine path through it, and you put little signs up, nice little signs saying, here you can see holly blue butterflies, here you can see field crickets, here you can see soldier beetles, and you put a little bit of information and a photograph on the sign so that it becomes a wildlife education walk. You say, it's our flower meadow, it's a wildlife education walk, and the kids from the school are coming here every week or every month to walk through and see the changes in nature and find these creatures. And if you do that, no criticism.
Yeah, it really helps. In fact, on our website, if Anna's there, Anna, if you could put in the chat, we've got a link that you can download, a poster that kind of explains why, particularly in churchyards and cemeteries, sort of to let the grass grow long, why, when it will be cut. And it's got our number so people can actually contact us if they've got complaints as well. But it helps. I also do monthly nature notes that you can sign up to and give to your local editor of your parish magazine, which kind of goes through what will be happening in your churchyard or cemetery that month. And that kind of just brings the awareness, and we will talk about why grass might not be cut, anthills, bats, swifts. Swifts was a couple of months ago. So you might want to sign up to that as well. Just email me at andrea@cfga.org.uk. Because I think the more you just generally talk about wildlife, then when things do change, people understand the changes and are more supportive rather than it just coming out of the blue.
Yeah, well, I saw a whole load of little girls the other day, all with daisy chains on their heads. And I thought, oh, good Lord, I haven't seen a daisy chain for years. You know, made them as a child. And there they've come back. I thought, that is brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
Brilliant. Oh, yeah. So, Tim, thank you, Tim. Another way to play calls is use MP3 files on an old mobile phone played through a waterproof Bluetooth speaker and no wires. Top tips, Tim. Go to Tim's to find out more.
That is good. That is good. Yeah, that's good. You have to recharge the phone every so often, but it does work. Yeah.
Brilliant.
I've only just managed Bluetooth. I only just managed to do Bluetooth in the past few months.
Yeah, I'm only just getting to grips with that. Yes, so Karen, I'd love to have a recording of this talk to share more widely, please. Yes, Karen, you will. And it's going to be on YouTube as well, so other people can be inspired. Helen said, I've had a Swift box at home for 3 years with a caller but no residence. I'm a member of my PCC but have no luck with persuading them to add Swift boxes to the tower, despite producing plans for boxes, etc. I am now nearly 79 and running out of energy. Helen, let us help you. Let us help you. Let's think. So maybe, I suppose, for your own box, Helen, try the caller. Have you tried the caller yet with your own box? And with your PCC, I think what quite often, in my experience, happens is if you give them examples of other areas where it's worked, you know, and why it's worked and the other benefits it's brought to the church in that area. So, you know, the examples that Edward has given here, and we've got some examples on our website of groups that have done it and it's worked. Because sometimes it just sort of is fear of the unknown for some people, isn't it? That might help. But if you want to email myself or Edward, or both of us, we might be able to give you some more information that helps you not run out of energy. I know what you mean, running out of energy. You can have peaks and troughs, and it's okay to have a trough. I've been working for God's Acre for nearly 20 years, well, over 20 years maybe, but sometimes you do sometimes need that little pause where you are finding it a bit difficult to keep banging the drum, and you can just ground yourself and sort of maybe be quiet for a bit and then get the energy from talks like this and people like Edward, and then galvanize yourself again. But don't worry if you run out of energy and you have to be a bit quiet for a bit. We all go through that, I think.
Yeah, I'd agree. Yeah.
Paula said, would it be unwise to put SwiftNext boxes on our house in West Wimbledon? We have a lot of holes in the walls and eaves. House sparrows are nesting there, thriving small colony. And I have seen sparrows can sometimes take over SwiftNexts and even eject chicks.
Yep. We've also found that swifts will eject sparrows from nest boxes. So yeah, you've got that risk. If you want to help swifts, if you can do it, you might put the swift nest boxes far away from the sparrow nest places, like on the other side of the building. But otherwise, yeah, you will have that problem. Some people block their swift nest boxes with something like a cork or an old sock on a length of string, and then they only open them up. They pull the length of string and get the cork or the sock out when the swifts have come back.
Wow,
we did that at London Zoo, which has got a huge population of sparrows, and they were taking over our swift nest box at the London Zoo. So we kept them up. We kept them blocked up until the swifts came back. But you've got to be able to access the box. I appreciate this could be tricky.
Oh, brilliant, though. That's a great tip. Tim, yeah, many local councils, for example, Cherwell, mandate next boxes in all new developments at an average 1 box per dwelling. Oh, 3 cheers for that.
Yeah, it's great. There's more and more people doing, the councils doing this. Brighton's doing it. I was looking at their paperwork yesterday, and we are finding that more and more councils are starting to do this. The main problem is checking that the developers actually do it. I've worked on lots of building sites, and it's not just Swift Nest boxes, it's lots of other things that get forgotten too. So you sometimes find them. You find them when everything's finished and you're going for the final meeting, and in the corner of the room is a whole stack of boxes or something or other that should have been fitted. And you thought, oh no. But yeah, it's checking compliance. So
That's a good,
yeah, so it's a good idea to sort of pot around any new development, see whether they've actually put them in, and then tell the council's planners if they haven't. I mean, I did a big job once where everybody was ever so helpful, totally sympathetic, and when I went back to the site at the end, just before they were finishing up, I found all my Swift Nest boxes on a pallet in the courtyard. And so I said to the clerk of works, I said, good God, I said, look at that. He said, oh no. And then he instantly organized 2 chaps with an electric hammer drill to go up on the roof and fit them all. But if I hadn't gone along and found them, they probably would have just been left behind.
Yeah, that's a really good point, following up, isn't it?
Yeah, following up. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, Paula, they are changing mowing practices to rotational planting herbs and wildflowers and phasing out plastics and pesticides, planting a small orchard. Oh, that's it. Yeah. Okay.
That sounds very nice.
Yeah. Sorry, that's a conversation there. Yeah, so Tim said again, Edward is right about checking new developments. On a development in our village, a Swift brick was installed vertically instead of horizontally.
Yeah, you see that people have experience only of blue tit boxes, and so the poor old bricklayer thinks, it goes in like a blue tit box, and so it's an honest mistake because he wasn't taught how to do it. Now, if you use AFS's Action for Swift's S brick, it is very conveniently marked top and bottom. because we know this happens. So otherwise, teach the bricklayers. I mean, it's like every other job. You've got, people from, quite honestly, people from the chairman of the board down to the bricklayer have to know how the thing works. Everybody knows how a tap works. Right, I mean, everybody knows how a light switch works these days, but anything new, you've got to show them. So I've been onto sites and I've taught the bricklayers and the roofers how to do it, and they're always interested. They're always, it's something new, it's something different. It's they like the idea. It refreshes a job which can become very monotonous. So off they go, and they often produce really good results. I mean, they'll fit difficult things really well. So teach them, try to get on the site and teach them how to do it.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Well, thank you so much, Edward. It's just so inspiring, as it was many years ago in London when we met. And I'm so pleased that you've come back and been able to do this webinar for us all.
Good. Anytime.
So everybody, that's the website to go to for advice down below. Also, do come to us if you need any help too. That's just brilliant. Thank you so much. I'm going to watch this again probably tonight because there's lots of information there that I'm needing to absorb even further. Thank you so much, Edward.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much, everybody, and hope you have a really good week. Thank you, and do a bit for Swifts. Thanks.
Thanks everybody for coming. Yeah, thank you everybody for coming.
Bye. Bye.